Hi, I'm Valerie Stivers, and this is Hank Zona.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody. And we are re-drinking, which means we are bringing you a current wine or spirit or beverage that has an interesting cultural history. And today is our first musical re-drinking. Hank, tell us about it.
Yeah, people are used to you writing about literature, great literature, and food, and me helping out with the wine side of it. But we realized that that wine and spirits cut through lots of forms of culture and today's music. And one of the things we both kind of learned through conversation is that we both like the Grateful Dead. And Grateful Dead make lots of references to drinking in their songs. A lot of it happens to be.
We can share the women. We can share the wine.
Yeah, a lot of it's wine related. And in Wharf Rat, you've got August West is drinking Burgundy wine, and probably not really good, expensive Burgundy wine that's out there today. So there's references through lots and lots of different songs. But the one that's always sort of fascinated me is Rock and Rye, and I guess I should play a little bit of it so people understand what we're referring to, right?
Yes, go, please do. Are you supposed to dance?
Like this.
Or like jumping?
Here we go.
I'm talking, sorry, play.
So, half a cup of Rock and Rye. So, in my teens, one of my very first jobs, I used to clean a nightclub. I used to go in the afternoons and clean this nightclub, and there was all kinds of bottles of liquor on the shelf there. And the one most unusual one was Rock and Rye, which looked like whiskey, but it was with all the liqueurs, and it had desiccated fruit in it. What looked like a peach or a lemon or an orange. I can't even remember.
To a teenager, is gross, right? You're like, why is there something in that bottle?
Yeah, exactly. Because people don't like stuff where they don't expect stuff in a drink or in a food. So I never really tasted it back then, but here it is. It's in the song, and rediscovering the music again, listening to it. I thought, let's talk about Rock and Rye, and so that's what we decided to do. Rock and Rye is interesting because it is based on rye whiskey, and there's a resurgence of interest in it because there's been a resurgence in interest in spirits, especially American spirits, bourbon and rye.
And old-fashioned Americana kind of spirits. I mean, that's in the cocktail trend. Maybe that's even over now, but for a while, people have been looking back to those older drinks.
Yeah, and I think it was a good way to sort of make a spirit that might have a little bit more appeal because there's a little bit more sweetness and fruit to it. It's not something that's kind of just pure whiskey and harsh. So Rock and Rye goes back to the late 1800s, where it was actually panned off as something medicinal until the government finally said it's not medicinal. And when you looked at recipes, there was even whorehound, right, in a lot of these.
There was whorehound in it, and it's actually interesting. So you bought a couple of Rock and Ryes, and I decided to make one with whiskey and to make an infusion. It was supposed to be medicinal originally. And the way that I made it, actually, I ended up making it very sweet. The point is that it has rock candy in it, by the way. It's called Rock and Rye because it has rock candy. So I ordered some actual rock candy crystals, and it's rock candy and dried fruit. And in the recipes that I found, it was sort of a obvious Christmassy kind of palette of oranges and lemons and cinnamon and star anise, which I thought was sort of boring. So I did something pretty different and used more summery dried fruits that I had. I made some pickled peaches and did one version with pickled peaches and kaffir lime leaves and cardamom. And then I did another version with dried pears and dried blueberries and limes.
Which is great because you made it seasonal as opposed to almost like a Christmas holiday sort of flavor. I think some of them have been made to be sort of like a Manhattan in a bottle too in some cases. So one of the ones I bought is actually this Jacqueline from Philadelphia, and it goes back to the 1880s. If you wonder if Rock and Rye is popular,
that's an old one. I mean, that's one that's been around since the 1880s.
Yeah, it's been around. You can see there's stuff in there. It's a bottle with
Have you tried eating any of that stuff?
I have not tried eating it yet, but that there are like lemons and looks like dried cherries and stuff and other
Yeah.
stuff in. But interestingly enough, in Pennsylvania state liquor stores last year, they sold 3.2 million bottles of it. I don't know who's drinking it, but somebody obviously likes it because it is. I guess it's a Pennsylvania thing, or maybe some folks in Pennsylvania will chime in at some point once we post this.
Wow.
But you know, and even advertisements back then when this was first being made, it was really geared toward, again, not drinking, but respiratory ailments as well as the not specified women's issues. But
Depression and
it was proved,
homeschooling.
it was finally debunked, not medicinal whatsoever. But it really became a junky kind of liqueur, you know, many years later, and that's probably what I used to see on the shelf in that nightclub when I was cleaning up. But then in the past 10 years or so, with an interest in making artisanal distilled products, Alan Katz of Mr. Katz is actually New York Distilling Company, which is in Williamsburg. Alan Katz came up with this Mr. Katz's Rock and Rye. And again, he's used orange peel. He uses Bing cherries. He uses some cinnamon. None of that, though, is actually floating around in there, but probably because he realized most Americans just don't like stuff in their stuff, right?
Have you tried that one?
Yeah, and this is good because this is something that you can drink a shot of. This is something that you can use in a cocktail, or you can just drink it on the rocks as I just poured it. So, and I'm a rye drinker. I actually, of all the spirits, I really like rye. So, cheers to you, Valerie.
Thank you. I am not a rye drinker, and when I made mine, I made it very sweet actually because I was trying to make it something that I would probably like to drink. And I have to say that in one spoonful, if you take just a sip of it, it actually is very medicinal. It feels medicinal. Like it's got a ton of sugar in it. It gives you like a little boost of energy. I tried to make it make a cocktail out of it, and I wasn't as crazy about that probably because I made it too sweet. But for like a medicine, it's a good medicine. Mine is a good medicine. How is yours?
It is good for respiratory ailments, at least, right? And it's a muscle relaxant probably as well if you drink enough of it. So this is interesting. This one is not sweet, and I suspect it was made that way. There's fruit flavor in it. I definitely taste the cinnamon in it, but it's not super sweet. But again, one of the things we learned too, that rock and rye is not music. It's not minerals. It's actual rock candy, and of course, you went and found it and used it. So
I did, and I barely managed to get it into the infusion before my children ate the rest of it. So I was going to show the rock candy, and I have no rock candy left to show.
As long as they're not eating the fruit that was in the rock and rye.
Yeah. Although this is an interesting aside, if people care about this kind of thing, the one that I put the pickled peaches in, the sugar did not all dissolve. And the one that I did not have, and I'm assuming that was the vinegar in the pickled peaches for some reason, because the other one exactly the same, and the sugar was gone within 24 hours. But something about the vinegar infusion with the pickles prevented the absorption.
So the kids were actually trying to steal the rock candy, and you were trying to steal the pickled peaches before they went into the recipe, right?
The pickled peaches, the real star of this was the pickled peaches. It was so wonderful. But so one thing I wanted to say is that I have been listening to a lot of Grateful Dead because I have the Day of the Dead, which is a Grateful Dead tribute album arranged by the guys from The National, which is one of my bands. And sadly, in that series of 5 discs, which I do listen to all the time, they don't have this song. So tell us, as a closing note, what is the song about? The Rock and Rye song.
It's half step Mississippi Uptown Toodle-oo. And there's different storylines in it. Some of the lyrics actually, Robert Hunter, they believe, was inspired by some old Negro folk songs. And there's also a verse in there where that makes a reference to when Jerry Garcia was in a car accident and actually was thrown from the car and literally out of his shoes, and lost a friend in it. And he used that as a sort of inspiration to kind of move on and use it as a motivation to really launch himself forward into the music industry. And that's where he's kind of saying goodbye to
too long I'm gone, goodbye, right?
Yeah. So it's and it's it's just a good jaunty song. So,
It is.
and
Um,
of the men in their songbook. So,
Fantastic. I also have a glass of Rock and Rye here, so I have some dried blueberries in it.
cheers.
Everyone. Is that it? We're good?
That's it. We're good.
Goodbye. Thank
Take
you.
care. See you all next time.